Welcome to KidLit Catalyst. Today's guests are Janet Fox and Julie Artz.
You get so swept up when you read a story that maybe often people don't realize that many of those things that are delightful were done with great intention to be delightful. And so they don't happen by accident, right? They happen through deep revision and multiple iterations and getting feedback from your critique partners and your coaches and your readers. And that's where the magic happens.
And we've been so excited about connecting with all of you, loved getting to know you a little better. And we're just truly excited about the synergy that will undoubtedly happen today.
Me too.
I get the privilege to introduce you to everyone who may or may not already know you. And we have Julie Artz here. Oh, I should tell you, if I get anything wrong, if I get a pronunciation wrong, if I get your book title wrong, which has happened, I must confess, then please stop me and I'll just say it again. Okay? All right.
All righty.
Julie Artz spent her young life sneaking into wardrobes searching for Narnia. When people started thinking that was creepy, who would think that's creepy? She had to find other ways to explore her passion for whimsical adventures. That whimsy is still with her today. And now she finds those long sought doors to magical story worlds in her work as an author, as an editor, as a book coach, an active member of the writing community. She volunteers for SBWI and Pitch Wars, which I haven't been to and must clearly attend. She's an author, accelerator, founding coach, and is a member of EFA and AWH. Julie lives in an enchanted forest outside of Redmond, Washington. I think we're joining her today, so hopefully that pixie dust stays with us. And strong-willed teenagers and a trio of naughty furry familiars whom I simply must get to know. And Janet is a former SBWIRA and ARA. She's a former teacher whom we all admire so much. The teachers in the world have a few in this circle today, and an MFA in writing for children grad of Vermont College of Fine Arts. And she's an author of 8 books for young readers, including Artifact Hunters, which came out in August of 2020 from Viking, and Carry Me Home, which came out in August, will come out in August of 2021, so stay tuned, from Simon & Schuster. And she's also a certified book coach, and we'll have more in the show notes. So you can follow each of them on their social media and find out more on their websites. And today, you'll learn more about them with us on KidLit Catalyst. We're so excited to welcome you today, ladies.
And I gotta say, I've got to up my game, Julie. Your bio is so entrancing.
Thank you.
Maybe we should ask about bios, because that was...
Janet,
why are bios so hard for writers to write?
It's like, no, I want to create things. I want to make things up. I don't want to talk about myself.
True. So true.
We should be writing each other's bios, huh?
There you
We should. Because we tend to not brag about ourselves, right? And be uncomfortable with that. And I truly admire the creativity. And it hints at something I'd actually love to ask as a question to launch off with, which is clearly that sense of wonder is key to part of your being. And if I may do a little segue, I recall reading years ago about one of the finest athletes who just done an Olympic amazing, like all the field events he was winning at a gold level. And he was going for the world record on longest long jump. And he shared that as a child, he would jump from his grandmother's little metal strip between the linoleum of the kitchen and the carpet in the living room. And he would run to that line and launch off and try to jump all the way to her red chair and never quite reach it. And on the day that he got the world record, the gold medal world record, he felt himself and thought about everything light, feathers, hot air balloons, airplanes, everything that could fly high. And he said that as he neared when his heels touched down and he set that world record, that he could have sworn he saw the red chair of his grandmother.
Nice.
And as I read your bio, Julie, it made me think of how many of us had that seed in us. So I'm asking all of you, how many of you had that seed of wonder and story and adventure from being a child? Any of you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, in fact, Narnia, Julie, just to relate to your image, was the Narnia books were my favorite books growing up. And I'm old enough that my mom gave me each one as they came out. So I have some first editions of the books of the series. Yeah. And I agree. I think it's that wonder of what's behind the door. What is that magical place that I can go to? And of course, being a girl, I totally identified with Lucy. So, that was the hook for me.
Absolutely. With her being a healer as well, I just remember really, really wanting to be her, like the healer who also was going to be a warrior if she was called to do so, to protect the people that she loved and the things that she believed in. I definitely really wanted to be Lucy when I was a kid. And I don't know if you guys have read Erin Morgenstern's The Starless Sea. It came out a while ago, but I just finally read it this month. And there's a really, really wonderful Narnia moment where they go into a wardrobe. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I literally cheered. I was like, there is somebody else out there who feels about Narnia the way that I do. And she realized it in this book. And it was just a really fantastic moment for me.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. And now you get a chance to actually help other people find that magic. And that's, I know how that feels. And that's amazing. And I'd love to hear some of your stories. I know you can't share clients' names all the time, but even just some things that you've gone through with some of your clients that have meant a lot to you.
Like that. Well, Julie, I'll let you start.
On the spot there.
Question.
I'm working actually with a memoir client right now that has really been a moving experience. She's been working on this memoir for a long time and definitely has a vision for the kind of story that she wants to tell, but hasn't been able to structure it in a way yet that's engaging the reader's imagination. And so we were talking about it the other day on Zoom, and I just had this kind of catalyst moment where I realized what the big picture story was about. And we were both really emotional about it. I just said the sentence, your story is about this. And she started to cry. I started to tear up. And I just thought, I'm so lucky that I get to do this work because I get to make more books than I could ever make on my own. I love making my own books, but a very, very close second is being able to help other people find their stories. It's just really an incredible process, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Absolutely the same. I truly love this work. I fell into it so fast and had no idea what I was getting into, but it was like taking this big leap, sort of like the leap that we all take, when we start writing books and put them out into the world, in any form, whether they're, published or not. And I've had the same experience with clients that I won't name, but you guys all know these people, and which is fun. And and one in particular where we were talking about the heart of his story, and we both began to cry because he was realizing that it was truly his heart, his story, and came from such a deep place. And he'd never really kind of come to terms with that until we'd gone through this process. And it's such a gorgeous story. And it's out on sub now, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Yes, exactly. And you know this story too, Julie. And really it was just, it was for me, that moment, because he was one of my earliest clients, and going through the whole process from the beginning of the writing until, now it's out on sub, was truly the moment that I realized that I want to do this for the rest of my life. Writing, I love writing, but I want to do this for the rest of my life because it just is so fulfilling to help someone find their voice, find the soul of their story. Yeah.
I can so totally relate to those things you just said. I do creativity coaching, and sometimes it seems like most of my clients end up being people in the KidLit world. But I remember being at an SCBWI conference and watching one of my clients up in the front, presenting and talking about this book that we had worked on. And I'm sitting in the back feeling like I'm watching one of my kids at a school program. And like if it was one of my kids, I could at least, tell the person next to me, that's my son, but no, I have to, just be happy there by myself and not share that. But that feeling, it's the same thing. I think that led me to teaching in the first place and working with kids. And it's like we're all just kids in these big bodies and need someone there to help us find the next step and help us figure out who we really want to be and what we really want to be doing. And so the work that you two do is really important.
Oh, thank you. I mean, my niece called the other day and said, Aunt Julie, your name is in this book in the acknowledgments. And I was like, yeah, that's what I do. I help people make books. She said, but I loved this book. I can't believe you helped make this one. And I was like, yes. It was a really, really nice moment to have my niece. I think in general, my family has no idea what I do. So it was a nice moment. Yes, I helped make these books.
Yeah.
I've read that one 6 times over the course of its life. Yeah.
I'm so curious. Can you guys, these are amazing stories. I love hearing these, and I can totally relate too to, mentoring people, helping people. But what does this process look like? How, I mean, I don't want you to give away any of your secrets or anything, but how does it work? Can you just explain to us a little bit about what it is and how you approach it?
Yeah, it's different every single time. Every single client is different. Every client, every book comes in with its own needs and desires and the work that has to be done is different every time. The work with the writer as well as with the book, because there are 2 aspects to this. One is being sure that writer is listening and that you're listening to the writer, as well as then looking at the work on the page and trying to get a holistic sense of what's needed to make that work come alive and what's possibly missing or not. And for me, it's offering suggestions as opposed to saying you need to do this, because it's never clear that you need to do this and that's going to make it right. It's always, let's talk about what it is you're trying to say deeply, and then let's see how we can make those words come alive. Because as you guys know, as writers, you all know that what's in your head is never what's on the page, right?
So true.
It's, that is true for all the arts. And that's where a lot of that imposter syndrome comes from, because we think, oh, I got lucky, something turned out that people like, but that wasn't what I intended. And therefore I have no ability, right? I just was able to fake it. It was a fluke, even after you get published. So.
Wow, that's
so funny
profound.
what we do to ourselves.
Yeah, and I think a big part of coaching is really just coaching people through imposter syndrome. Of course, we're working on the craft and on the heart of the story and the big picture and the line by line writing, but quite often I find I am doing part cheerleader, part writing teacher, part mentor. And I work with people who are still learning the very, very basics, like what is a scene? How do I choose the point of view for this story, all the way up to people who have multiple books out in the world and just need help with some aspect of the current story that they're working on. And so it really is, as Janet said, different for every client. But in general, I typically have people submit pages. I give homework. I give lots of reading homework. That's the first thing that I'm going to say is I'm going to find 5 comp titles for what you're working on and make sure that you've read them. Because I think that the best way to learn to be a writer is through reading. So, once we get past those sort of initial stages, there's a lot of just Zoom calls like this, where we jump on and we talk about the week's writing and what's working and what's not, and what they're struggling with, and what I see as needing to be revised as they continue to move forward. And it's just a very collaborative process.
Yeah, I think the comp title thing is really key. And I'm working with a writer right now, and he's submitted this enormous manuscript as historical fiction, and I'm reading it and I'm going, he's writing narrative nonfiction. He's not writing historical fiction. He's got all these passages of history, and he's clearly deeply fascinated by the history, and his characters are not characters. They're people. They're not characters. And so when I went back to him with my first edit, it was, I want you to study these 2 genres, and here are the comp titles you need to read to decide, do you love this or do you love that? And what it is that you're relating to, and what it is that you want to bring to life. Because in the historical fiction, you're going to have to X a lot of this stuff that you've got in there because it's not part of your story. And if you're writing narrative nonfiction, you've got to get, take away all the fictional aspects. Yeah, that's the basic sort of approach. That's the most fundamental sort of approach. So I think Julie's right. You start with the very basics, and you can be working with an author who's published, multiply published, and you don't need to do those basics because they're already there. But you need to do something else, and that's getting to the heart of their story, what they're trying to say.
It's so helpful because it can be a real time saver too. People don't realize that because we can't see our own stuff, and a lot of people don't realize that writers do get help with, through critique groups or getting coaches. They assume that these people sit down and write a manuscript and it just comes out beautifully and it gets and they decide to get it published, and then it gets published. And and so people don't realize that they can do it. It takes time, and you have to be willing to learn, and getting help is like the way to go.
Yeah. How has your training and then your practice of, engaging with clients and doing this coaching, how has it affected your own writing, your own work?
Well, I say things to my clients every single week that solve problems in my own stories. So I think sometimes I'll be confidently saying the character's motivation is not clear here, and that's why there's not enough tension in the scene. And I'm like, oh, that scene I was working on this morning, that's what's wrong with it. So I think there's a real synergy there, and it helps me to be more intentional in my craft too, because I spend so much time analyzing other people's craft. Then I'm less tempted now to write something just because it's pretty and just because it sounds good, and to keep that focus on the intention behind the story.
Yeah, and Julie and I are both trained in the Author Accelerator program, which is really, it's not necessarily geared to writers who are going to become coaches. It's geared to anybody who's going to become a coach. So there's some really basic fundamental principles in play in the workbooks, in the training. And I found that extraordinarily helpful to go through that from like a beginner's perspective, as if I had never written a novel, and now looking at it like, oh, and seeing it, because the way that Jenny Nash, who set up the program, has written the material, it's very fundamental, but it's also from a different direction than I had taken necessarily before. Not always, but there were always little things in there that I go, oh, that's a great way to solve that problem that I've been struggling with in whatever it is I'm working on right now. So I think that's, as Julie just said, there's a great synergy in these two fields that we're in, the writing and the coaching.
Well, and I have to credit Jenny Nash for introducing me to Lisa Cron and Story Genius,
Oh yeah.
which if I had to pick one craft book that has changed the way I write, it's that book, because it's all about how your characters' motivations, their desires, and their unmet needs drive everything behind the story. And that was so illuminating to me, and especially in KidLit. Janet and I write middle grade, and middle grade kids in real life often don't have a lot of agency, but you have to have agency to tell a story. Right. Otherwise, you're not, if the main character is not driving the actions of the story, then you've got a real problem and struggle to keep the reader's interest. But thinking about their desires and their motivations is a really good way, especially in middle grade, I think, to approach a story, even if the child can't drive yet, doesn't have a job, doesn't have money, still has to go to bed when mom and dad tell them to go to bed. They can still find agency in their own way through those motivations and desires. And I think that was just a really foundational book for me. And I love teaching it. It's one of the things that almost all of my clients end up reading Story Genius, because I love it so much.
Yeah. That's definitely one of my favorites too. Yeah. Boy, all this stuff you're saying, I can just, it's like I hear it and I filter it through my coaching, which is totally different than yours. And I'm really glad, to have you to send people to when they want to really dig into all the specifics of novels and stuff. Because for me, like when Julie was talking about, saying something to a client and realizing that it affected that scene, it happens almost every time I'm on the phone with a client where, and I'm doing creativity coaching and I'll say something and it's like, oh my goodness, did I ever need to hear that today? It's like,
even with my critique group, I find that I learn more about what's wrong with my manuscripts by critiquing other people's manuscripts than the actual feedback that I get specifically on my own, right? It's like,
yes.
you notice things and it's like, oh, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. So yeah.
And for me, my own best revising is if I'm in a critique group and I know they are reading my manuscript right then. And so I kind of look through it and all of a sudden it's like I'm seeing things through their eyes. So I'm madly making changes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the difference between what Julie and I do and a critique group, at least from my perspective, is, again, it goes back to not telling the writer what to say, because a lot of critique groups, I know that they sometimes, go in that direction and say, well, you really shouldn't do this or you really should do that. And for me, I'm extremely careful not to do that. I just present the options and say, I'd like you to think about X. I'd like you to think about the point of view here. I'd like you to think about what the character is saying there. Tell me more. And by querying the author in the process, because often we're going through the whole process of the book, not just one little aspect of it. It brings the writer to realizations about what they're trying to say and how to manage that. Right, Julie? I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's the difference between critiquing and coaching is it's a much more global sort of approach, and it's a much more author-centered approach. So much more like what you're doing, Deb, with your clients. It's much more creative focused as opposed to product focused. Would you agree with that, Julie?
Yeah, and I mean, I do encourage all my clients to try to find a critique group because it's good to have
Yeah.
multiple sets of eyes on a story and to get that reader feedback. But I do think we're focused really holistically, and that tell me more question and why, those are probably the two questions that I ask the most often. Again, that idea of being intentional in your storytelling, I think makes a really big difference. And I think you get so swept up when you read a story that maybe often people don't realize that many of those things that are delightful were done with great intention to be delightful. And so just they don't happen by accident, right? They happen through deep revision and multiple iterations and getting feedback from your critique partners and your coaches and your readers. And that's where the magic happens.
I love hearing you say that, Julie, because I've heard people talk about, well, even critique groups and revision, but certainly book doctoring or story coaching, and say that, oh, well, that'll make it not mine anymore. Then it loses that creative spark, right? And I love hearing you say that. No, that's how you put it in there. You put it in there deliberately. It takes really hard work. It's not. You're not just going to magic it out of the air, right? It's so interesting to compare the inspiration versus the perspiration.
It's so true. When I left, I worked in high tech for many years before I started working in publishing. And when I left high tech, I was so burned out and so tired of meetings and writing for business, and I just wanted to do something creative. And what I envisioned was sitting down with my pot of tea and moving into writing in a very zen flow sort of way, and every moment being a delight as the birds chirped in the background. And what really happens is it's hard work.
It's true.
I mean, I'm still trying to do that.
I am too. I mean, and those moments where we do get into flow, where those happen, those are like some of the best moments of my life. But to get to those moments, you have to do the hard work on either side of it, I think. And it's not, and nobody is ever going to think that copy editing and line editing is joyful work.
No,
Please, I'm not going to. Oh, Laurie likes it. You'd rather do the line editing and the copy editing.
I know how that works. I'm good at it.
Yeah. No, I'm like the big picture person. I hate the details, but I can do details if I'm focusing on that dream, on that the big goal, the big picture thing that I want to complete. Then I can do those steps. But that's what I have to do in order to feel inspired at all, is to always keep that dream in mind. And I love how the way you work with people really honors what they want and how you're drawing it out of them. And no one has to worry about, feeling, like Laurie said, feeling like someone's taking their story over, because it's theirs and you make that clear.
Yeah, and I think that's really a credit to the training that Jenny has put together, because that's one of her foci. Speaking of copy editing, and because she really does stress that that the writer is the god of their story. That's her phrase for it, and for us as coaches to honor that gift that the author is bringing into the world, and to help them bring that gift into the world, and not to try and make it something that it isn't. Like, I'll go back to that example of this writer that I'm working with who doesn't know what he has. I just said, here are your choices. Now go and find out what you want to do. Because I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you that this is one thing or the other. I'm just going to give you these options and say that this is what I think you have to weigh in order to move forward with this and make it work on paper. And so that's, I really credit Jenny's training for that.
And it is such a gift to have someone give you that opportunity to see things in new ways. Sometimes we think we have it on the page And it's only when someone asks a question and says, and you answer this thing you think you did on the page, and then they say, but that's really, really good, but that's not what you put on the page. And it's amazing how after that you'll go, oh, yeah, I didn't, did I? So that it is such a gift to have someone not tell you what to do, but to give you that opportunity to draw it out.
Celeste, I just flashed back to you doing that once. And like I said something about something being missing. You said, no, it's there. And then you explained it to me, and I said, yeah, that exactly what you said. Put that in there.
Yeah. No, it's a real thing, at least for me. And it is a gift to have someone you trust. And clearly everyone here is so trustworthy that you can have, hear that and reflect that back. It's a really powerful gift to have for a writer.
Yeah. And for me, I bet this might be true for some of your clients too. It's often the emotion that gets left out for me. Like I'm feeling it as I write it, but it's almost like you have to point to it somehow in order to have it transfer to the reader. And so, I can remember early on when I was writing and having a critique group member saying, yeah, but what is she feeling? It's like, what do you mean? What is she feeling? She just went through,
That's that Midwesterner coming out again, Deb.
What's that?
That's that Midwesterner coming out again.
Uh-oh, what did I just do?
We can't show our feelings, right?
Right.
Yeah,
no emotion here.
Yeah,
Put up the
a
wall.
small town Midwest girl.
Yeah, I had a really great first editor on my very first book. And I'll never forget it and it was written in first person, which is, as you all probably know, first person is actually very distancing. It seems like, oh yeah, you're right inside the person's head. But in fact, in first person, you have to be very careful that you're not telling all the time instead of showing, because you think you're showing it and you're not. You're actually telling the reader what's going on. And I can remember my first editor, almost every line was, well, what's she thinking here? What's she feeling here? What's she thinking here? And I'm going, honestly, really? And it was such great training because it made me step back and say, I'm not putting it on the page. It's not there on the page where it needs to be. I'm just telling the story. So that's something I refer to a lot, is whether I actually have the character's emotional arc clearly defined and then clearly established on the page in a way that the reader can relate to. So,
and then you have to find a way to say it without using the name of the emotion. I was so angry, or, she got really frustrated.
Yeah, I do think that writing emotion is one of the hardest aspects of craft to master. And it's probably the thing that I spend the most time coaching about and thinking about in my own work. I'm actually working on a novel in verse right now, which is such a challenge because poetry is raw emotion. It's all emotion. So like, how do I craft a plot when I'm telling this story in verse? And it's been really an interesting challenge. And again, it's also first person, as novels and verse usually are. And it's that same thing. Like, how do you show emotion without naming the emotion, without telling the emotion, without spending too much time inside the character's head and not enough time in the action of the story? It's a very, very fine balance, and a huge craft challenge.
That would be.
And I could use some help with getting out of my head more in general too, but yeah, in stories, but that probably is because I live there too much myself. But yeah, I notice that I do too much of that when I'm writing fiction. I'm in the character's head too much.
My first drafts are
saying what's in the head. I have to be in their head. Yeah. I just don't have to put it all on the page.
My first drafts are almost always 50 pages of the character walking on the beach, through the woods, thinking about all the questions of life. And I've realized that I need to do those 50 pages, even though they'll never be in the final draft, because that's my exploration of the character and what they're thinking and what they want. But it's laughable because there is nothing that resembles plot in that 50 pages. So that they have to be written and then put aside in favor of finding out what the actual plot of the story is.
Oh gosh, Julie, maybe we should do, talk to someone who's an astrologist, might have something to do with us, since we're birthday buddies.
There you go.
Yeah, it's often for me as a writer, I find that I think I know what my character's arc is and what they need and what they want and what their goal is, and generally speaking, I don't find that true until I get into like the third or fourth revision, and I suddenly go, oh, that's what she really wanted, isn't it? That's what she's really desiring, and then it comes true. And I've found lately that that if I look at the whole span of everything I've written, it doesn't matter what age range, whether it's a picture book or whether it's YA, that I'm finding that all of my characters really want the same fundamental thing, and that comes from something that I wanted as a 12 to 13-year-old. And so more and more I'm saying, trying to work, when I work with a client, I'm saying, okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter about you, because it's really something that drove you as a child at the age that you were when you were of your character. What is it that was driving you at that time in your life? What were you thinking about? What were you wanting? What was lacking in your life? Because I'm finding more and more that that's what, in my own characters, that's what they are lacking. That's what their goals are, is what I was thinking about as a 12-year-old. And I remember when I was at Vermont College, Marion Dane Bauer did a lecture on this, and she talked about it being that the writer's internal desire through life is echoed in their writing. And for her, the key was an abandonment issue, which is not my issue. I won't tell you what my issue is. But she talked about abandonment, and so if you think about those in the very basic way, it's sort of like you can get to that point faster if you think about it as a coming from inside you and out, as opposed to trying to bring it in. So.
Yeah, we've had a lot of those conversations lately, it seems. This whole idea, it's like theme is coming from this internal thread that you have through your life, and it shows up on the page whether you intend it to or not. Sometimes what you can do is, you can discover it at the end of your draft, of whatever draft it is, and then find ways to strengthen it in there, or mirror it, or repeat it, or other ways to bring it out. But it's interesting that we don't always, usually we don't have it when we first begin the story. We're just compelled to write this story, and then you discover what it's really about.
And then you go, oh look, there it is again, the same theme that I keep writing over and over.
Right? And some worry that their theme won't be in their book, that I haven't put this in. And it's like when you remind them, no, I see it in there. Always, it shows up whether they're trying to create it or not. That message shows up in authentic writing.
Yeah.
So speaking of that process, how do you know you've gotten to the end? Because as writers, so often, most that I know are also perfectionists. So how do you know you've gotten to the end? Meaning completing it, finishing it. Speaking of 1,450 revisions, drafts.
The Celeste speaking from her own personal experience.
Personal experience.
Well, I will say one of the things that I love to do is help people pitch their stories to agents or editors. And unfortunately, I will say I almost never get someone through the gate who I think their pages are ready. So they come and they say, I'm ready to query. I always ask to read at least the first 25 pages and see a synopsis of the story so I can have an idea of the big picture. And almost always I read the first 25 pages and I think this isn't ready to go yet. So that's a delicate conversation with the client, because maybe they've been through the 1,245 revisions and their critique group has said, yeah, this is ready. And I feel like I can quite often see something pretty obvious that needs to be tweaked. And sometimes it's only a couple of hours of work. Sometimes it's only wordsmithing. Sometimes it's something more major, like you're starting the story too early or you're starting a little bit too late. But I do think that that is a very difficult question to figure out when your story is ready. And a lot of people don't figure it out until maybe they've sent, 20 or 30 queries and aren't getting the kind of response that they want. So that's one of the reasons that I offer the pitch package that I have, because I do have lots of experience writing queries and I have helped many, 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 many people get agents and sign their first book deal. And I can get a pretty good, just sort of instinctive feel when I read something, whether it's ready to go or not. But in terms of as a writer, figuring out if something's ready, I'm as guilty as anybody else of thinking something's ready before it isn't and sending it off and thinking, oh, my perfect words. And then I have a particular friend who is the plot goddess, and she'll write back and be like, well, there's still some plot issues here. And I'm like, no, there cannot be plot issues with my perfect draft that I just sent you. What are you talking about? So I guess I would say you probably almost always need one more revision than you think you do. I guess that would be my advice.
At least.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's I sent a manuscript to my agent 4 months ago. It's the one I'm still working on, and I kind of knew it wasn't quite there, but I was hoping, as we all do. And she came back and she said, no, this, and this. And I said, why is it so much easier for me to see this in my client's work than it is in my own? And again, it's that, it's just really hard for us to see where we haven't quite hit it. On the other hand, I had the book that's coming out this next summer. I wrote that in almost one sitting. I mean, that book just came tumbling out, and I sent it to my agent and she said, yep. And so it was one of those, I find that every book is different. Just like every client is different. Every process is different. There is no one perfect way to write a book. There is no one perfect way to coach a book. And bottom line is you do have to sort of go with your gut sometimes. And so I knew when I wrote this, Carry Me Home, that it was there. I just knew it. I just knew it, and it was, and it sold really fast, and now it's coming out. So I think that each time we do this, it's going to be different. And you just have to kind of feel it a little bit, go with the emotions.
Well, yay, congratulations on that.
Well, that was a lucky one. That's
it's good to have a lucky one every now and then.
Yeah, see, there you go again, right? Oh, that was just lucky.
Yep. So
that's great.
Wow. Oh, this was so full of so much yummy stuff. What fun.
What a wonderful conversation. This has been really rich.
It has been. What would be if you had to distill it down to one sentence or more, what's your best advice for writers? What's your nugget of wisdom?
Lightning round.
Saved the hardest question for last.
Right?
With no warning. No heads up.
Well, I think I would say trust your intuition, and if that sounds really, really scary, work hard on trusting your intuition. And that's even true for the last question you asked. I think our guts know if a book is really ready or not. Like Janet had that sense that her book was ready to go, and she sent it out, and she was right. So many things in this world teach us not to trust our guts, but all of the magic of story and creativity comes from that deep knowing that we all have. So try to find that.
Powerful.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. I mean, to say that there is even one nugget of wisdom, I think sets up
Right.
an expectation. You know, if you writers out there don't think that you know, one thing is going to answer all the questions, because it isn't. I mean, you know, some people would say, oh, you have to read, right? And some others would say, oh, revise, and someone else like me would say, find your core principle and operate on that. Now, I don't think there's really one special magic bullet for creativity. I think creativity is, I mean, Julie just said it. Creativity is something that you have to trust, and you have to kind of believe in. You have to kind of have a faith, as it were. There's a little voodoo to it, and magic, and you know, wear the crystals or whatever, and just I think find the process that works for you, and know that it's probably not going to work for the next book, because that's generally true. But I do think that probably one of the more fundamental ones is you got to read a lot in whatever, and it doesn't matter what you read. You just have to read a lot, because the more you read, the more you fill that well of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, great
Really
question.
insightful too, Janet.
Great question, Laurie. Are you going to answer it too?
Am I going to answer it? Well, what I think my answer would be something similar to what both of them said, which would be, I think part of trusting your intuition and part of finding your process is just being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Like we're just going to have to keep stumbling our way through. Like Jana said, every book is different, right? We think we have our process, we think we know what works, and then all of a sudden it doesn't. You know, we think we know our theme, we think we know it, and then no, it's something else. I think just getting comfortable with the fact that this is never going to be easy. It's always going to be work. It's not going to be where we started with that cup of tea and the zen, and we're just going to, flowing words are going to come out of our fingertips, right? I think it's just getting comfortable and accepting that writing is complicated, and there's always going to be parts of the process that are hard. And we just have to be willing to embrace that and push through it. That would be mine. Deb?
I knew she'd do that. You know, I love what you said about creativity there, Laurie, because it's like I always say that creativity is discovering order in chaos. But you do have to be, you know, okay, feeling like you're in an earthquake once in a while, you know, like the ground underneath you is just not stable. And usually that's because something's about to happen, you know, but it's a different kind of earthquake. So, but for me, I think the advice I would give is to really consider the difference between motivation, where you're pushing yourself to get towards the thing you want, and inspiration, which is coming from that internal dream and that place of knowing what you really want. Because while they both might get you there, you're going to stay with it longer if you can keep that focus on the dream in mind, and that's the inspiration part.
Nice. Very nice
stuff.
Yeah.
And I would just say, just keep writing, just keep reading, just keep listening, and for those sparks of inspiration and working it through. And like all of you said, enjoy the journey, because you never know how long or what turn or what connection will happen because of it. And you never know, nor can determine for sure where that great adventure will lead you. So do it for the sake of your passion to do it, and know that it will turn out if you just keep reading, just keep writing, just keep connecting. It's an incredible thing in and of itself. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I love this time.
Thank
with
you,
all of
guys.
So great.
Thank you.
Super fun. Thank you.